Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Ugly, Irresponsible, and Childish, where two industry veterans talk about the unrelenting pursuit of creativity and the people, work, and culture that celebrates or suffocates it. I am one of your hosts, Mark Levy.
And I am the other, Jeremy Baca. Always good to see you, my friend.
Always good to see you. And I honestly can't believe at this point he's still speaking to us. But we are truly lucky and honored to have Joe Esterhaus back for episode number 3. And, Jeremy, I don't know what your thoughts are. And Joe, obviously, you have a say in this, but I think we're just going to do these until you decide to stop speaking to us.
Well, okay.
That's my point.
Wait, I have stopped. Okay, go fuck yourselves. You guys, bye-bye. No.
Oh, great! Now we already got to do some editing. No, I love
yeah, like Dad. Oh no, it's Joe. Okay.
I was going to say the legendary Joe Esterhaus. Joe, does that ever bother you when someone calls you a legend or talks about you in that way?
Only when my brother-in-law does it. Otherwise, I consider it flattery. But
yeah. But it's true. You hear that word is thrown around so loosely, especially in our industry, I think. And but in this case, as the saying goes, Google it, bitch. He is a legend. Joe Esterhaus is, and thank you, Joe, for being here with us again.
Thank you. My pleasure. The only time what I feel really good about people saying that to me is when a screenwriter says it. And says, when I started out, I looked at your career and then you had a legendary career. When I hear from a young screenwriter, I feel really wonderful.
That's great. That's awesome. And Joe, we've been on perhaps kind of a wandering journey of your life during these past episodes. We've gone from, we've kind of bounced around, but we've gone from refugee camps to your days as a poor immigrant in Cleveland, didn't even speak English, to the moment you fell in love with the notion of not only reading but writing, and went to Ohio University and pretended to graduate, and then ultimately working at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the juggernaut of Rolling Stone, and we just touched on Hollywood along the way, but this time or for this episode, we're going to dig deeper into some of those Hollywood moments that really put you on the cultural map, I think. If you're willing to travel along with us on that.
I have let you be my guide, Jeremy, for 32 years. You've run me into walls on occasion, but I'll risk it here. It's okay. Let's risk it and see where we go.
Just now, let's expose it for all of our. Did you ever graduate? Did you graduate from college or no?
No, I was on disciplinary probation for living with a co-ed in unapproved housing. Now I had won the William Randolph Hearst Award for being the outstanding college journalist in America, but I couldn't graduate. I tried my best to negotiate with them, but I broke the law. I actually even brought my girlfriend in to negotiate with me, who was very, very pretty and articulate, but even that didn't work. So no, I never graduated. But about 10 years ago, YOU did a thing about their most famous graduates, and they referred to two people, Matt Lauer and me. Now, Matt has been canceled since then, and I'm dubious, so because I never did graduate.
Yeah, those are showcase students for sure. But well, good to know. Joe, when you're writing at Rolling Stone there along Hunter Thompson, you both of you are getting into this you kind of discovered it on your own, this new journalism where the journalistic rules, restrictive rules on how you tell a story, you kind of opened that up and were more focused on the story and sprinkled in the facts versus, the journalists were just all about fact based. You just tell the story and that's all you did. And then Hunter was doing his gonzo kind of thing. And did that storytelling, that ability to tell stories in ways that were animated and exciting and emotional, that's sort of what drew you to Hollywood, as I understand. And we talked last episode about you writing Fist alongside Norman Jewison. But as you're writing these stories, and find yourself writing scripts, how did you navigate that? And I know Norman was kind of your guide and your muse on that first film, Fist. But how did you learn to write a screen? How did you know you were ready to write screenplays?
Well, to a great extent, Norman taught me. I didn't know anything about screenplay writing. I had always loved movies, and I'd gone to the time I was like 14 when I went with my dad to see Italian war pictures. But I'd always loved them, and even as a reporter, on occasion, I would sneak off from the office and see a new movie that had just opened. But in terms of writing them, I knew, I think that my literary heroes, essentially the Holy Trinity of Hemingway, Faulkner, and Fitzgerald, had all done stints in Hollywood. But Hemingway's advice was, the drive up to the state line, take the money from Hollywood and drive the other way. Faulkner did it for many years and quietly while he wrote his classics. And at one point said that the best part of it was that he had a mistress for all those years, and that brought him great inspiration. And Scott Fitzgerald actually and had a heart attack there as he was still working and then died. So I was wary. I knew all of that. The first draft of Fist that I did with Norman was 500 pages long.
Yeah.
The normal script is 120, 100 to 120. And all of the research that I'd done was in it. And then Norman, a man of great patience and compassion, read it and said, "Kid, this I don't know what the hell this is." He said it weighs like Tolstoy, but it doesn't read like it. You've got a monologue here that goes for 15 pages, and that's 15 pages of speech directly into the screen. And he just sort of looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said, "But Norman, if they're really good words, what difference does it make?"
Right.
Norman picked up the 500 pages and hurled it at me, and then I barely ducked and got out of the way. Now, what this man did is, because for some inestimable reason he liked me, he worked through all of the 500 pages. We edited it together. We chopped it down. At his suggestion, I rewrote it. And even then, I constantly objected to his suggestions. And he did a little tricks, like, he left an envelope that said personal and confidential in the room that I was staying in his house. Accidentally left it, and of course, I glanced at it and read it. And it said that he had made $8 million that year. And the next morning, we're working on the beach. And he sort of looks at me impishly and he said, "You read it, didn't you?" And then I looked at him and I said, "Well, yeah, I did read it." He said, "Yeah, if you take my advice, then maybe one day you'll make that kind of money, kid. You hear me?
Yeah.
Did you hear me, you dumb asshole?" On another occasion, we went sailing. And then I'd never been sailing in my life, and we had some choppy seas. And Norman looked at me and said, "Are you frightened?" And I said, "No, I'm fine." He said, "Nah, you're scared shitless. And just remember, I could dump you right here and nobody would know." Um, when we premiered the movie, we were on this little plane from Des Moines, Iowa to Chicago. And we had really hit rough weather. And the Norman came back to me and said, I want you to know one thing. If we die here, I get the first paragraph and you get the last. Okay.
Nobody knows you. But
This
did
is
you
the
learn
Mm.
how
this
you
is
learn
the kind
so
of man who's telling. But he took me to all the meetings that he had
okay.
with studio heads. He literally gave me a kind of unbelievable master's class in filmmaking and in film and in screenplays. One of the great moments of my life is that many, many years later, after I had done Basic Instinct and it had some hits, we ran into each other in the portico of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. I was getting out of a limo and he was standing there, and there were like 100 people around. He threw his hands up in the air like this, and he said, "I told you, kid. I told you this
Oh,
could
that's
fucking
awesome.
happen to you." You know, and we gave
That's
each other
awesome.
a hug. He's a remarkable man. And if someone said to me, "Do you owe your career to anyone?" Norman Jewison would be that man.
So it was only
So
those. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, what I remember reading about that film, aside from, this very special relationship you had with Norman, was probably the thing that I read as setting your tone for every Hollywood interaction you would have moving forward. And that was the battles that you had to fight with Stallone in order to, get to the ending that you really wanted to get to. And for those of you who don't remember the movie Fist, this was the very first film after Stallone had done Rocky. He was, the hottest star in Hollywood. He wanted to do things that were, a significant departure from what you had written on the page. And for, again, your very first film from the jump, you were ready to battle him over creative differences. How did you get the courage to do that, and the kind of chutzpah to really stand up to a guy of, and we know he's short, but a guy of that stature?
Yeah, you're fighting Rocky Balboa. What's wrong with you,
Yeah.
man? Who are you, immigrant kid from Hungary?
What the big difference was, this line, I hated the ending where Johnny Kovac is shot. And he said to Norman and to me, Rocky doesn't die. Okay, so and Norman said, "This is the ending. Joe wrote it. I love his ending. We're doing it." And lawyers got into it, and between Norman and Sly, and finally they set this line. They made a deal. It was one to one, one shot of him being shot, and if that didn't work, Sly was doing no more. The lawyers actually worked this out. So Norman said to me, I can't fuck this one up because then we're all in a lot of trouble." And he did it, and he ended it that way. But then, what caused the other stuff was that Sly told Arnie Archer, the big gossip columnist in Hollywood, that he had written Fist. And the and So Fist was looked at as by the media at that point as Sly's follow up to Rocky. And that, of course, really pissed me off. And then I got a call one day from a feature writer named Saul Pett for the Associated Press, a nationally known feature writer. He asked me about how it felt to have my first screenplay and have the biggest star in the world in it and one of the great directors of our time and blah, blah, blah. And I just unloaded on Saul Pett. I said, the guy's an asshole. I have been in more barroom fights than he has. I mean, if we met in one, I'd win. And he didn't write shit in it. And he's an actor to be lucky in it in a movie like this. Well, that went nationwide.
I'll
And,
bet.
and Sly had himself photographed with a punching bag and being quoted as saying, "That's Esterhaus." There he is. Right? No. It turned into a massive national feud. Norman, of course, backed me up everywhere and said this Sly had nothing to do with this. But then I sold the paperback version for a record price of Fist for, I think, $400,000 at the time, which of course was a vast fortune to us. I just had two children, and but the slime had to approve the cover art. Of course, the publishing company wanted to make money on the fact that Sylvester Stallone, the hottest actor in the world, was on the cover of the paperback. So he said he wasn't going to do that cover. He wasn't going to allow his photograph to be put on it unless he got co-screenwriting credit.
Oh my
So,
God.
so we worked out a deal because the money, of course, was all important. So it said story by Joe Esterhaus, screenplay by Joe Esterhaus and Sylvester Stallone. And I was forced into it, blackjacked. I did it for good reasons and for reasons of my kids and my wife, but it really hurt. Now, the movie comes out, it disasters. It disasters both commercially and critically. And it's looked at as a big flop. As I remember, Newsweek's first review was headlined JUNK for FIST. Right? So it was a total disaster. And when it's absolutely disastered, and it's a story, the disaster is a story in itself, then Sly comes out and says, well, I really didn't have anything to do with the writing of that. That was Joe's script completely.
Unbelievable.
Joe,
Um,
let
when
me
he
ask
goes
you.
on, let me do one other
Sorry.
beat to this. I think it's funny. A couple of months later, I get a call from Sly's manager, a man named Herb Nanas, who says, Sly would really love to buy you lunch. And he regrets what he said and all of that. And he'll fly you down and put you up. And so I flew down. We had lunch at Universal, and he apologized and said that his ambition overcame his own the way he really was, and we liked each other. And as time went on, I did one other movie with him, and near the end, but as time went on, we kept in touch. And if I look back on my 50 years in Hollywood, in terms of the actors that I worked with, he became one of my favorites, and we became friends after all of that. I
Right.
guess one of the points in answer to your question, Mark, that I want to make is, yes, I had a lot of fights, um, but what's overlooked is that I had a lot of people who helped me, a lot of people that I liked. I did two films with Costa Gavras and two with Verhoeven and three with Richard Marquand. And if you do those kinds of films with that many directors, it's not all fights because then there's a cooperation and a thing and a communication between us that's rare. It's an important point that I want to make.
Yeah.
No, I think it's fair. What I want to ask is, and I don't really know how you're gonna answer this, and I just come out and say it. I guess when you get that level of criticism uh, from
Public
the
criticism.
critic, yeah, public criticism, yeah, and from the film critic community, and I think critics have had kind of a love hate relationship with you because they've lauded you on certain occasions, they've trashed you on other occasions. Does that affect you at all? Does that hurt? Does that bother you when you when something that you really poured your heart and soul into, when it doesn't resonate with the kind of self-appointed sometimes tastemakers of Hollywood? How does that affect you, if at all?
To a certain extent, Guy McElwain was the former head of two studios and became my agent, an early agent, and was my agent for 40 years. And we became more than friends. He was a kind of big brother. And I remember after the first reviews on Fisk came out and on some of the others, he sat me down and he said, understand something here. He said, these critics, they make 1/10 of the money that you make. Okay, nobody knows them. They all aspire to be screenwriters.
Mm.
And if somebody offered them a chance to do a script, they would jump at it for 1/10 of the money that you're making. So keep that in mind. My friend Richard Marquand, my director friend, and as I said, we did three movies together, simply said all critics should be taken out into the backyard and shot. The director, Mike Figgis, said all directors should be, I'm sorry, all critics should be taken out into the backyard and shot. Mike Figgis said all critics should be taken out into the backyard and headbutted to death.
I like that better.
So, there was that always. I was aware of it. What happened over the course of 50 years is it began, the Basic took a terrific amount of critical negativity, especially by women critics and by critics who said it was misogynistic. That 10 or 15 years after it was released began changing to the point now where it's viewed as a post-feminist classic by a lot of women critics, as well as publications like the New York Times. The same kind of thing happened with Showgirls. And it happened earlier. I did a little movie called Telling Lies in America, which was semi-autobiographical. And the critic for Newsweek began his review by saying, Joe Esterhaus has redeemed himself. I know it was the only American entry in the New York Film Festival that year. I just never took it all that seriously. You can't if you keep writing, And then one of the things that I did through the course of 50 years is I wrote, most of them were original screenplays, but they weren't in one genre. Big Shots was a little thing, but there was a big movie for little kids. The Alan Smithy film was a Hollywood satire. The I am known for my sexually themed films, but I also did movies like Betrayed and Music Box about very serious subjects, and subjects that lay on my soul for a long time. So, and one of the reasons I had so many movies made, essentially, I think, was because the genres were so different.
Yeah.
In through the years.
Hey, Joe.
So I would advise young screenwriters simply to try their best to disregard it. Does it sting at times? Yes, it does. But don't fall asleep thinking about it. Just do your own vision and your own stuff and try to stick to it.
And I think, Joe, and Mark, you can attest to this. I think in our industry, Joe, the creative teams and even the account teams and the people behind the programs and campaigns they create for clients, they do stay up and think about it, because what happens is, notoriously, a client will come in and say, this doesn't make any sense. And this is going to take too long to roll out. And we don't like this. And so subsequently, what they do during the next pitch is, oh my God, we got to make sure it doesn't take too long to roll out. We got to make sure that that it's on brand. And they get so hyped up on the last client's criticism, they change the way the next creative looks entirely. And it's like, that was 5 people in a room that has now just changed how you create moving forward. And you're saying that critiquing, even publicly, never changed the way you wrote. You weren't sitting down and saying, these critics hated this character, maybe I should change this a little. You never went through that moment.
I had one great defense that you guys don't. Some of my movies were gigantic hits. And huge hits early. Jagged Edge was a major hit. Flashdance was a great money-making hit. And the fact that they were commercially successful gave me a great deal of armor in terms of the critical opposition. And in retrospect, I feel that.
Yeah. So
when you're writing some of these scripts, and you've talked about before that Hollywood is by its very nature at least partially collaborative. People are going to have input, and you can decide to take or leave that input. My question is, when you believe in something, when you really think that this is how this should work in this script, and whether it be the director, the producer, the studio has a different point of view. Sometimes the actor, like Stallone, if they have a different point of view, do you go through any kind of thought process as to okay, what am I going to fight for here? Or is it all, is it all one thing? You kind of decide, this is not the hill I'm going to die on. I'm going to fight for this thing over here. or you know something, at the end of the day, this is not worth the headache of the fight? Do you go through that kind of thought process?
Sure, I do, and I did. On rare occasions, relatively rare occasions, I agree that the suggestion I'm getting is better than what's in the script. Costa Gavras in Music Box. My ending of Music Box was totally different. And Costa said, and I'd worked with him before on Betrayed, and I had a great respect for him, both creatively and as a human being. And I thought about his ending at some length, and I decided, like 5 days before the shoot was going to begin, that he was right, that it made sense, and I essentially, rewrote it with his ending in that period of time before they shot it. It didn't happen often, but I wanted to try to keep myself open. I didn't want to just not do something out of ego. I kept my ears open to really hear what they're saying. But overwhelmingly, even the best directors, never mind the studio heads who were imbecilic at times, but the very few directors were actually writers that I appreciated creatively. Sometimes their visual ideas and their structural ideas made sense, but they weren't writers. And part of the challenge with each film was to make the director understand, you, my friend, are not a writer, and I am. So and then that was a necessary struggle at times. The Verhoeven in the first big argument over Basic said to me, "Well, I am the director, yeah, and you are my screenwriter, and you do what I say you do, right?" And I said to him, "If you say anything like that to me again, I'm going to come over this fucking table at you." Understand? And my friend Irwin Winkler, who was going to be the producer at that point, and you're a fucking Nazi. It blew up. Michael Douglas was there. He was going, "Gentlemen, gentlemen." And, and, and Irwin and I were both saying, "Fuck you." It was the most, it was the wildest so-called creative meeting that we had. But I try to listen, and on occasion, certainly with Norman, I had to admit afterwards that he was absolutely right, and I learned a lot. But as time went on, there were absolute occasions where I said, "Well, I'm not doing that, guys." I'm with Sliver, the bad guy. The ending of Sliver that I had is that Sharon um, understands that the guy has killed people, but doesn't give a shit. She's in love with him. And there was a very, very shocking ending. The Philip Noyce loved it, shot it. It was somewhat tragic because two of the camera people were killed shooting the final sequences in Hawaii with a volcano that blew up. Anyway, there was all this human tragedy behind it. He shot it, did it, loved it. The focus group said that they loved it. And Stanley Jaffe was the head of the studio at that time, and I never met him. But we had a meeting, and I liked him in the meeting, and I think he liked me as well. And he said, "Joe, I just can't put my name on a movie like where the bad guy wins and she doesn't give a shit about what he's done. As the head of the studio, I can't do that." And I argued my case, and Stanley said, "Well, I understand, but I just can't do it." So I said, "Well, Stanley, I'm sorry, but I can't write that." I'm sorry. And Stanley said, "Well, I was afraid you're going to say that." And they made Philip reshoot the whole thing, shoot the whole new ending, went back on the set. And Sharon wrote the last line I heard, which is "Get a life." Sharon's not a writer either. She not a writer either. She
Sharon Stone, yeah.
Sharon Stone. And the movie disastered it completely as a result of it. It could have been a different verdict anyway. But yeah, at times I've said I can't do it. I'm sorry. I've tried to do it in as civil a way as possible. I mean, sometimes my own temper gets the better of me, but I've apologized on occasion. Arthur Hiller, whom I genuinely liked and respected his work. We had a meeting with Andy Viner, the producer, in the middle of it, and my temper got the better of me, and then I said, I call him a doddering old fuck in the meeting. Words which now at 82, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
they think
yeah,
are
yeah.
horrible. But I apologize, but sometimes that happens in that kind of meeting, So the when I look back on it, on all of it, there are moments that I regret, like that one. The I wrote an 18-page memo about the young director's suggestions that gave him a kind of mini heart attack, and he went to the hospital. I regretted that as well. You
What
know,
movie was that for? Burn Hollywood Burn or
no, it was for Nowhere to Run.
Nowhere to Run?
Nowhere to Run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, one of the most frustrating things, and this also, you've talked about this with me personally, and we experience this big time in our industry as well, is when you design something, create something, write something, and everybody wants to put their fingerprints on it, right? So everybody's got their little change, their little deletion, their little addition, and by the time it's done, you're like, and they suddenly show it to you, or it's released to the public, you're like, that's not what I intended and not what I created. The tough part about on your end is that a director can take your writing and it goes up on screen sometimes without you even knowing. I mean, you only discover at the premiere that this thing has been bastardized, which puts you in the position of saying, oh, well, like Sylvester Stallone. Oh, well, I had nothing to do with that. I didn't, that was their idea, which makes you look like a douche, on one level. So how do you handle it publicly when you're going, this movie's getting slammed and you're like, well, but that wasn't, you experienced some of that with Showgirls and the rape scene with Paul in Showgirls that Paul Verhoeven did. Can you talk a little bit about how you address that when someone changes something and your name's on it?
Um,
Literally.
One of the ways to try to prevent that is to write the spec scripts. Don't go and pitch an idea, which most screenwriters do, or do an outline of it. Write the whole fucking thing, and say, here it is, guys. Do this. Do this as on a spec basis, mostly, which is before you have a deal. Now you're taking a big chance because then nobody may like it, So, but once it's done, as Patty Chayefsky said, and he's the only screenwriter I think that I really respect. Patty said, you know, if you bake the whole pie, there's less of a chance that they'll piss in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true.
Yeah.
That's why I've overwhelmingly written respect. The When I became more successful and I had some big hit movies, they became much more respectful. And then I went public, and then they became very wary. I'm talking about the studio heads and also directors and people like that. So that made it less likely that they would really fuck with it. Because they were also concerned about the public fallout of it.
Well, but
Um, the,
you had a you had
no,
the you had,
no guarantees,
right, because you had written Jade, and then who William Friedkin, who did The Exorcist, changed the ending. And I remember being at the premiere, and you're like, well, you changed a lot of it, and you're going,
It
what
wasn't,
the
it
fuck
wasn't,
is this?
it wasn't the premiere. It's an interesting story. Billy came to Naomi and I, and Jeremy's sister had a very big engagement party, and Billy was there and made a little speech. And in that speech, he said, "Joe has written the perfect script. I'm not going to change a comma." Okay, the final rough cut before it was locked. I got an invitation to go see the rough cut, and Naomi and I went. And the rough cut had all kinds of changes in it. I said Sherry Lansing was his wife and the head of the studio. So I expressed my displeasure and all of that. And Sherry said that
She's the head of Paramount, Joe. Sherry was the
yeah,
head of Paramount.
Paramount,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
Paramount.
go
She
ahead.
said we're working on it. I'll talk to Billy and don't worry, honey, and all of this. And then we went to the very first opening, which is I think where you were with us, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And all of that was in it, and it had all been changed around. There is no defense against that, and in terms of actually, it's a very funny story. The We walked out and got into our limo, and as we're pulling away, we saw Sherry behind us trying to run after the limo because she saw how pissed off I was. Um, the the and then my agent passed on the fact that we were very upset. And Sherry said she tried and all of that. The When the movie came out, and then I realized that I was dealing not just with Billy Freakin, but with the head of his wife, the head of the studio. When the movie came out, I measured my public criticism of it, partly because before it came out, Paramount unexpectedly came to me and signed me to a $3 million deal for a movie of my choice, and which was obviously a kind of attempt to calm my criticism.
Yeah.
And in
So
that
you didn't
sense,
bite the hand that fed you that time.
it calmed my criticism.
All it took was 3 million. Hey, Joe, I want to jump to because you mentioned both Betrayed a couple times, and there was also a movie, Jagged Edge, starring Jeff Bridges. Betrayed was starring Tom Berenger, and Mark and I were talking something interesting about both of those movies. And this was not being done a lot, and I would argue that you were one of the first to thematically craft a movie this way, where the good guy becomes the bad guy, is the bad guy. And traditionally in Hollywood, the good guy always wore the white hat through the whole movie, right? But in both those movies, it flips, and you're like, oh, you just made me like this guy, and now I don't like him. With Bridges being suspected of actually murdering, being the murderer, and Tom Berenger being a racist that's part of this whole cultish kind of behavior in the movie. Would you agree that that was novel at the time, and was that difficult to get approved through the studios because it was so different?
I agree that that question is the kind of question that a film critic would ask. And in that sense, I threatened to take you out into the backyard and headbutt you to death, Jim. You know,
Is that my first film critic style question?
not your first, but
Fuck
your
you, man.
first.
You know,
But
I can get other, I don't need you. I can get other celebrities on this
not
podcast.
your, not your,
You don't
not
have
your
that many
first,
brother-in-laws.
but possibly your least inspired. You know, that's also possible. The That's the only way I'm going to answer that. Thank you.
But I found it, but when I watched that movie, one of the things you also smacked me on was when I said, "Who do we root for in this script?" I'm not sure who we root for. And you're like, "Who the fuck do we root for? Don't talk to me about rooting for." And you gave me shit about that. But why
Yeah,
is
that's
that
good.
so? I don't understand why that's weird. I don't understand why that's.
I should have headbutted you right then with that. I remember that moment. Let me tell you a story. Goza and I decided to do a movie about a man named Father Charles Coughlin, who was a Catholic priest who turned into a raving anti-Semite during the war years and led the American Catholic Church to a kind of almost universal anti-Semitism. He was a hugely popular radio speaker and preacher who spread this filth everywhere. And we thought it could be a very powerful piece. We went into together and talked to Mike Medavoy, the head of I think he had his own production company. His name I forgot. Mike Medavoy, but someone that we respected, and then talked to him about it. With him at the meeting was a young woman who was a production assistant that Mike said would make a great executive. So we tell this story about prevalent and anti-Semitism in the 40s, led by a Catholic priest and preacher. And they listen to it. And Mike says, it sounds really interesting to me. And then this young woman says, I don't understand. I don't understand why we're even considering this. Who do we root for? and
Oh yeah, yeah. So
and,
you're,
uh,
you're I
and
get
I
it.
said something similar to her that I said to you, I'm sure. You know, in
But why
terms
is
of
that
my
so
response.
weird? I don't understand why that's so weird.
Because
Don't you
not
find it?
not every movie do you need anyone to root for. It's not a football game. You've seen too many Ohio State games, football games. You don't need any kind of rooting interest. You have to be
Okay.
somehow moved, or it has to make some kind of sense to you, or some part of you. With some films, it's your groin. Other films, it's your head. Different body parts can be stimulated by different movies. But to say in that particular case, who do you root for? Reduces something that's elementally powerful in terms of what this man did and how what he did influenced the American public. Who do you root for? You root for the people that he abused, who caused harm to, all of that.
And
Yeah,
that's
well,
that. Yeah.
I hate to,
Go ahead.
Joe. You've got to know how much it just hurts my heart to agree with Jeremy on anything. But I think
I'm,
it
I'm,
may
I'm,
be,
I'm glad it's your heart. I was worried that it's some other body part, but it's your heart.
it
Good.
hurts that too. Don't worry.
Oh,
Uh, but I what I think Jeremy's getting to, and I think this is a problem of the audience, frankly, not the film, not the screenwriter, not the director, is that even if they say they don't have an issue with it, I think audiences struggle with the idea of moral ambiguity. And if there isn't a good guy and bad guy dynamic that they've grown up with as kind of, okay, here's how I interpret film. Here are kind of the rules of film grammar, right? There's the hero, there's the heavy, there's the love interest, there's the goal, the unattainable thing that you're trying to get to. I can understand, even if it's not an excuse. I can understand why audiences, uh, especially uneducated audiences, have problems with something because they're used to having things spoon fed to them. Like I do kind of get that.
I understand that. It's a black and white view of the world that you're talking about. And the best writing and the best drama is great. We are all great, truthfully. We all have our better angels and our worse angels. And to explore that, I think is terrific drama and very, very interesting. The So that I guess audiences want you to have a kind of all judgmental view, where yes, this person's good, this person's bad, so we will root this way. It's not life. It just isn't life. There is a grayness in all of us, and I think that and now you're taking a commercial risk, certainly in terms of if you do that, but it's worth taking that risk as a writer and it's worth taking that risk as a human being in life to view people as gray and then to view them that way instead of coming to very judgmental opinions very quickly.
Hey, hey,
There's
How
a
much
wonder,
credit?
there's a wonderful Leonard Cohen song that's called "The Secret Life," and that's what it addresses. All of us have a part of us that can get into stuff that's very dicey on a moral level.
yeah.
When you look back at your body of work, um, I don't know if you can separate this. Like, did you think differently at the time when you were writing, or do you view it differently in retrospect? Do you feel you gave the audiences like a lot of credit. Like, okay, I'm going to write this knowing that it's a little different from what they might be expecting, knowing that there's some ambiguity to it. But you know something? I trust the audience that they're going to get it and that they're going to understand it. Or did you ever have to write to like, well, I need to write this so that anybody watching it, whether it be studio heads, producers, film critics, or audiences, that are like, okay, this is something I have to do to make sure they understand the points I'm trying to make.
I sometimes joke about having a twisted little man co-writer. And sometimes I think that he's really in command. My muse or my twisted little man or however you want to call this entity almost dictates what I'm writing. And I try not to objectify and to psychoanalyze myself or the twisted little man to see where this comes from and what the effect is going to be. But that's the way I envision the piece. And that's really what I fight for, Mark, when I get into a fight, because it's the way that I envision the piece. Hopefully, in terms of what I've done, and I've certainly done it in movies like Music Box and Betrayed, where I try to make a significant moral point, whether it has to do with the Holocaust or with the rise of right-wingism in this country. That audiences understand that, and it does some good, in my opinion, as I define the good.
Hey,
This might be the weirdest question. And then, Jeremy, I know we want to move
no,
on,
that's
but
right.
this is going to be the weirdest question I've ever asked, and maybe the weirdest question you've ever heard.
Are you asking
Yeah.
to be are you asking for to be headbutted too? And I did that once already in the discussion.
No, no, no. This is specifically what you've been talking about. Um, in terms of creative differences with again studios, with actors, with directors, etc. Do you ever have creative differences with the Twisted Little Man? Do you have a kind of internal battle that you have to fight sometimes?
Um, I guess I guess I try not to do that because he's been so good to me.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'm 30 some scripts, 50 years. And this presence that I'm talking about, which a lot of writers have talked about in terms of the muse, but it's a presence I'm talking about is ever present. You have interior dialogues with him or her all the time. You wake up, and sometimes I've woken up with the two-thirds of a script in my head, or if I'm working on a script, it all happens subliminally while I'm asleep. Um, the uh, the sometimes certainly in a situation where I let him take total reign, the things go a little bit over the top, and I do a rewrite on my own because I realize that it's way out there. So I guess there's a certain kind of disciplining that goes on in that sense. But that usually doesn't come from the outside. It comes
Yeah.
maybe from me saying, "Come on, fuck this guy." I mean, what are you going to get you in all kinds of trouble?
Right.
So,
Joe, one of the things, put a fine point on this part of the conversation, and I want to be respectful of your time. And there's another big topic I want to get to, a couple actually, but you've told me you never sit down and say, okay, I'm going to try to write a really commercially successful movie. That
right.
has never been your inspiration. It's what do I want to write? That's it. Full stop. Is that true? Would you say
Yeah, it's
that's
absolutely true. I've never. George Lucas is known in the business for putting a lot of thought into what could work commercially. And certainly George Lucas has done some gigantic commercial things. I've never contemplated that. And the one of the reasons, I mean, sometimes I've done some really offbeat movies. I know, checking out that Jeff Daniels was in was simply because I was approaching having a midlife crisis and realizing my own mortality and that comedic aspects as well. And I thought that was that was in it as well. Big Shots was about a little white kid and a little black kid and their friendship together, and it explored the possibility of friendship between whites and blacks on a comedic little kid kind of way because it wound up as a kid's favorite on HBO. They come from real different directions. You know, the most controversial one, which was never made, was the one that Steven Spielberg wanted to make, which has gone
Yeah,
down as the most famous unproduced script in
yeah,
Hollywood history. Was the Sacred Cows.
yeah.
The and God knows where they came from. I mean, I've been a political junkie all of my life, and I have been in farm areas, and I've been around farm boys, and I understand what happens and secretly in farm boys' lives at the age of 13, when the definition of the word pussy totally changes them. But where did it come from? I have no idea. I was at the time that I wrote it, I was going through my Mike Ovitz issues, and Irwin Winkler's theory when he read it was that somehow Ovitz was in the middle that of that whole screenplay, inspiring me in some level. I never quite explored that train of thought with
Well,
that.
and just for our audience, we talked about Sacred Cow in the last episode about it's a script about a president, a U.S. president who actually fucks a cow, literally fucks a cow.
Well,
Not a disparaging.
what happens to the guy is that he's an incumbent president, and he's campaigning, and everything's going to shit.
Mm.
In his personal life, his issues, his daughter has issues, his wife has issues. He has a serious booze problem. And during the campaign, he's campaigning in some rural part of Iowa, and then he winds up staying in the farmhouse that he grew up in for one night. And he had too much to drink, and he wakes up in the middle of the night in a certain coma, and he hears a cow mooing out in the barn, and he does what he did as a kid all the time. So I
I think we've all
realized
done that.
Stephen really wanted to do that movie.
Yeah, you talked about that. One of the things that I wanted to get into, just in respect to your time here, is you mentioned Michael Ovitz, and this was your defining David and Goliath or Joe and Goliath moments. And for those of you that may not know, Michael Ovitz, back in the day, what was that, Joe, in the late 80s, mid to late 80s?
Yeah, and it was in the late 80s or around 90, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Okay. He was a super agent of Hollywood. This guy was renowned for making and breaking careers, and he did both. He literally did both. He could put together deals just by, almost a wave of his hand. He could bring the actors he wanted. He could tell the producers what he wanted. He was a super powerful agent, arguably the most powerful agent in Hollywood at that time. And Joe had a confrontation with him that led to a very public dispute. And Joe, I'll kind of let you talk about what happened when you were sitting in front of Michael Ovitz and said to him that you didn't want him to represent you any longer because you were going to go with a friend, Guy McElwain, who you were actually trying to help out because he was just becoming an agent and trying to get a foothold as an agent in Hollywood. And you were doing Guy McElwain a favor, a solid, by saying, "Look, I've got some fame going of my own. Why don't you take me on as a client?" And
Yeah.
Ovitz wasn't having that. What happened?
Well, let me back up a little bit on Guy. Guy was the former head of Warner Brothers in Columbia, um, and Ray Star, and he had been for some time my agent from the time that I essentially started. He was like a big brother. He became a kind of absolute mentor to me. And he had been at Columbia, where he was replaced and had come back to being an agent after representing me and others for many years. So it was an important and crucial part of his life. because after being the head of the studio, and I was becoming just another agent again. I had been represented by CAA and by Ovitz for a couple of years, as Guy was at Columbia. And to be very fair to them, they were terrific. They got me big deals, and when I say they, Michael had a supervisory, Ovitz had a fight supervisory position as my agent, and there were always younger agents who were actually doing the work. But as Jeremy describes, he was the most powerful agent in town, and some people said the most powerful guy in town. And I went into his office and told him that I was going to go back to Guy and explained to him that this was because he was my big brother and that he had made my whole career and that I loved the man. Very simple. It wasn't any choice other than that. I appreciated all the work that they had done for me. They had done very well. I thanked him profusely and said this was an issue of the heart. And he was in a difficult position, Guy, and I wanted to help him. And Ovitz sat behind his desk and just sort of looked at me and he said, "Well,
He's a creative artists agency, right? Ovitz was yeah.
creative artists agency."
Yeah.
And looked at me and said, "Well, if you do this, my foot soldiers who go up and down Wilshire Boulevard are going to put you into the fucking ground."
Okay.
I
Sounds
was
like a movie.
I was mind boggled by it. I mean,
Was he smiling when he said it? Was he kind of, was it
slight smile.
yeah. Hmm.
The and I said, okay, let me go think about it. And he very politely walked me down to the front door, shook my hand, tried to give me a hug, blah blah blah, and I left. And I spoke to my lawyer, Gary Hirsch, and he said, well, Michael means it. He's the most powerful guy in town, and you've got a terrific career going. And if I were you, I wouldn't do this. So I thanked him and went home and thought about it. And meanwhile, Guy, I said I have to think about it, but he said this and all of that. And Guy, because he was such a great friend and because he loved me, said, "Well, you have to do what you have to do." And I understand the situation. So I went home and I thought about it, and it kept eating away at me. And the fact that I felt horrible about what I had done to Guy. And after a couple of weeks, I decided I can't do this. I just can't live with myself if I do this. So I wrote Michael Ovitz a letter. In the letter, I essentially said, I think I said literally at the end of it, I've got my portable typewriter and I've got my family. So fuck you. I'm leaving.
Did you say "fuck you" literally, Joe, or just
I think it's in the letter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And the guy, I told Guy, and he said, "This is the greatest moment of my life," and then he hugged me crying, and I felt wonderful. And then the LA Times somehow got a hold of the letter and made it a banner headline in the calendar section, running the whole letter. And from there on, other people picked it up. The AP picked it up. Harper's Magazine ran the whole letter. Spy did a whole thing. The media went apeshit. The Ovitz, when the letter broke, he called me 3 times in one day and said, he wanted to come up and talk, and he tried to talk to my wife and all of that, and I didn't speak to him, and then
he at the time he denied all of this, right?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I was desperate to come up, and weird things started happening. We got a phone call that said, "You're a dead man," and somebody hung up. The newspaper, one morning I went out to the driveway to pick up the San Francisco Chronicle, and there was a there was a skull and bones scarf tied around the paper. The
Whoa.
So I hired a private eye up there just to keep an eye on the house. And then a friend of mine, whom I won't name, was very close to Ovitz. He called me from the East Coast, where he was on. I think his daughter was going to school, and he said, "Listen to me. I never called you. This didn't happen. Go away for a while. Go to Europe. Check your tires. Check your car.
Christ.
Be very, very careful." And Jerry Esterhaus, my first wife, and I talked about it. We decided to stay at home. The and We lived carefully for a while. The Wolfgang Puck, who was a friend, said to me, "Be very careful." And he was in business with Ovitz, and he said, "Be very careful." Michael never forgets. He remembers for 20 years or 30 years. Just be very careful. I went to Guy. The very next, interestingly, I wrote this spec script called Original Sin about 3 months after this. The Well, no, let me go back a beat. This got huge publicity in town as well. And the at the Music Box opening, at the Hollywood premiere, the industry premiere, when my name came on the screen, I got a standing ovation from the crowd.
That's awesome.
People just there, and that of course doesn't happen to a screenwriter ever, and it certainly never happened to
But
me.
if I remember in the book, also at that same time, everybody was applauding you in the dark, but everybody was so fucking afraid of Ovitz that like they didn't want to be near you. They didn't want to
No,
be seen as
no,
one of your
exactly.
guys.
They looked at me and pointed, "Here he is." Um, the next, I did another spec a couple months after that, 3 months or so after that, called Original Sin. The ICM put it out again, and we heard that Ovitz was calling around studios and telling them not to buy this. And then a friend of mine, Andy Wynum, who had been approached by Ovitz twice himself, he told me, bought it. The and they bought it from, I think he bought it for $1 million too. But the movie was never made. And I always felt there was a shadow, over me that should be careful, careful with it. And Ovitz also went to another friend of mine, a very public friend, and he said, "Well, I know that Joe has a reputation with women in this town. Which women exactly, and who would talk to me, right?" So things got very scary for a while.
Well, there was one.
Interestingly, and Michael wrote a memoir, I guess about 5 or 10 years ago. And there's a chapter on me, and he says that he made me famous, which really gave me a laugh.
That's
You know,
funny. And Joe, what I find interesting about that story is the actor who publicly came out, one of the only ones that actually spoke up and said, "I believe Joe. I believe that this happened." And it was Sylvester Stallone. Is that correct? That he was the one that actually stood up and said, "I believe what Joe's saying." Did I get that right?
there was another one. There was another actor who sent me a letter, saying that the same thing had happened to him. It's in my book, but I don't remember who it was. That been a long time ago. Sly did it at certain points, say he's a good guy and back me up, somewhat indirectly, as I remember. But the other actor was very, very direct about the same thing happening to him, and the producer, Bernie Brillstein, also in his memoir wrote that the same thing had happened to him. And
Oh.
there was a director named Howard Zeef who said that he didn't directly accuse Ovitz in any way, but he said that after he left the agency, someone had forced him off the road on his way to the valley, his car off the road. So it was a tough time. It was a tough time for my family, and but what I will, what I will always be thankful for is that at this particular moment when he was having difficulty, the guy gave me a hug and said that was the happiest day of my life. Yeah.
And
And
yeah, go ahead,
I
Michael.
was just going to say, as kind of the coda to that, uh, having read it in the book and then having read some of the media around Ovitz's book, it his trajectory about this incident followed a really predictable arc. First is I never said it. Then I said some of those things, but they were completely misinterpreted. Then I said it, but I was joking,
Okay.
and then I said it.
Well, if you want to talk about an arc, you
Sort
know.
of very Trumpian explanation, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, Mark's good, Joe. Mark's good. He's a sly one. Uh, but you know what, Joe? After that, it seems, to kind of springboard us into our next episode here. It's your career took off, and his became kind of muted after that, and you kept going into this celebrity status. You became almost a mystical figure, like you said. You're getting the standing ovations in theaters. You got a renewed sense of attention, respect, and legendary kind of status, while Michael Ovitz just gradually, disappeared, and not that quickly, but eventually. Would you agree with that? Is that kind of your take on it or no?
I would never agree with anyone who uses the words mystical figure for me. I'm a fucking Cleveland guy. We don't have mythical figures, but well, you're not wrong, Jeremy, in terms of how it went. I don't know the details. I know that he had an issue with Michael Eisner. And I know that for a while he started his own agency, his own management firm, but that things didn't go well. And I know that he went through a difficult divorce, as did I. But I don't know much about him after that. I read the book out of curiosity, and I was really laughing when he said he was joking.
That's
I,
funny.
I got the joke at that moment.
So, Joe, this is where, I got you and I finally met through my sister. And I remember, this is when you were at the height of your career. I mean, you're this immigrant refugee from Hungary, right? You're living on the cliffs of Malibu now. And I watched a steady stream of producers, directors, actors, musicians coming out, making the pilgrimage to your house out there in Malibu because you hated to go into Hollywood. You didn't want to make that drive, and didn't really like that world. But you became iconic, and people are driving out to your house, putting these multi-million dollar projects in front of you and saying, "Hey, let's do some of these." And you reach this really super status as a celebrity screenwriter. But as you ultimately told me, that kind of got tiring. This notion of celebrityness, and you talked about sending one of your kids to school for a show and tell day, and a couple of the kids brought in Oscars as part of their show and tell. And this kind of changed your opinion about Hollywood and whether you wanted to stay or not. Is that right? Is that how it unfolded when you?
The sort of the height of my career after 32 years of marriage, I have to say, is that I met Naomi and married her, and that was the height of my career. And that really changed my life to a great extent because we had four children very quickly. The Naomi would walk into a store with me in Beverly Hills, and they take one look at her and they say, "Call 911." So because she was always very pregnant. The
That's what.
and having the four kids, I had felt on some kind of spiritual level, and on a kind of metaphysical level, and unease. The I was living in a way that I knew wasn't healthy. I was drinking too much. I was waking up saying, who am I waking up with? Who is that? The My marriage was a shambles, and I'm and
You're not your marriage to Naomi, but
but of
your
course, my
yeah,
first
yeah,
marriage was
yeah,
a shambles. All of that was happening, and my life changed with her presence. I had a friend who was a kind of producing partner, and we began the day with him calling me and telling me what was going on in the business. And I suddenly got tired of the whole thing. There was something was missing. The and Yeah, I mean, I remember, for example, Naomi and I doing an interview with Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And
yeah.
I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what the fuck are you doing here doing an
Yes,
interview with Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous?
totally. The
Uh,
dude from Cleveland, right? And you mentioned that one woman who said that thing to you about being one of us or not one of us. What did she
What
say?
happened in the store is, and there was a line at the cash register, and we were in the store in Malibu. And she drew us aside and she said, "You can come over here. You're one of us." And I thought to myself, "No, I'm not one of you."
Yeah, yeah,
And there was an unease, and then I wrote American Rhapsody during this period of time.
a book.
Yeah, the book about politics, and a kind of my very odd view of politics and as drama, and then a kind of link between Hollywood and politics. And I had fun writing it, and the my book agent made a very big deal for a three-book deal with Knopf, which was the New York Yankees of publishing.
Yeah,
And I thought, well, this is really fun. And then when the book came out, it came out very shortly after I wrote it. We went on a gigantic publicity tour, Naomi and I, and we were in Chicago, and we're going through the ethnic neighborhoods of Chicago. And we started talking about, what if we didn't live in Malibu, and what if we lived differently, and what if our values were different, and as I say, she was very much with me in all of that. Having grown up in Mansfield, Ohio, not far from Cleveland, especially. And then I said, well, if we're talking about that, what about Cleveland? My family still lives in Cleveland. Your family lives in Cleveland. My dad's still alive, all of that. And then we made the big decision. I just felt and unease, except when I wrote the book, and I had fun writing the book as well. Also, the other thing that happened, truthfully, is it was one fight after another, and then you get tired of fighting,
yeah.
and I'd been doing it for nearly 30 years at that point, and I got tired of fighting. It had stopped being fun, and the also at that point, Guy was older and had begun to be sick. I'd done that thing with Arthur Hiller that I regretted. Um, the uh, the David Anson, the critic's name from Newsweek, may have said Joe Esterhaus has redeemed himself, but I didn't feel
Yeah,
very redeemed.
yeah.
So
Joe,
it all came together.
Naomi tells me a moment for her about when you guys said, you know what? No, we're moving back to Ohio is when Sean Penn was over for dinner and he was talking about the notion that your kids were going to grow up into drugs and into surfing, and like it or not, that's what's going to go on out here. And so just get ready. And you guys were like, no, that's not going to happen. We're we're going to go back and ground them in Ohio turf.
Well, Joey was, I think, 4 or 5 years old, and he had this tousled blonde hair, this beautiful little boy, and then Sean is prognosticating about what's going to happen. And he had a great line from Sean. He said, "You guys may not know where the Viper Room is, but he's going to." And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that certainly was part of all these little vignette kind of scenes that happened before we made that big
Yeah.
move. The and you know what? In after we've been here for 25 years and on all kinds of levels, it was the best decision we made. But I suspect we'll probably get into that in
Yeah.
your next segment.
And that's what we're going to do. And just to our,
Jeremy, I hope you recover from the headbutting. Mark,
yeah, I was just going to say,
I'm glad I spared you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
touching on the things we learned today, I'm nothing more than a fucking low-life critic. I think that's one thing we learned today. Thank you, Joe, for emphasizing that and making me
I feel like we're going to add that to the podcast introduction moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. But we're gonna, and if you think that Joe leaving Hollywood kind of ends his extraordinary story, you couldn't be farther from the truth, because things get real when they get back to Ohio. A lot of things are discovered, and even just before moving back to Ohio, some things were unfolding in Joe's life that almost ruined his career, almost took his life, and a lot of other things that were occurring that we're going to dive into in the next episode. Mark, I'll leave you for any last words as well. Anything?
No, I mean, again, Joe, thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for sharing all this. I know some of this is pretty personal for you and something you don't talk about often. So thank you for sharing with us. And you know, I know what we're going to talk about next episode. I know you kind of know what we're going to talk about next episode, and I know that's going to be emotional. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation. And thanks for the time.
Thank you, Jeremy. One final word to you. I didn't headbutt you, but God did it for me when you stepped on that rake all these years ago.
Would you just stop with the rake? We're going to have to tell the rake story. Okay, when I was young, I went out jogging and I stepped on a rake, literally, and it hit me in the face, cut my lip. Okay, so now everybody knows it was a mistake. I regret it.
And what point does Bugs Bunny show up in that?
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. No,
he got amnesia though as a result.
Yeah,
I'm told.
I got so much amnesia, I forgot that I had fucked the cow in the barn. That's how bad it was. But Mark, I'm going to let you take
the cow. The cow didn't forget. You might have forgotten. The cow remembers it vividly.
I'm the best piece of ass.
I never thought that I'd say this to you guys, but you're worse than I am. It's time to go. Thank you, guys.
All right, take it easy.